And you're gonna get this morning is the Fever go to 3-0 without Caitlin Clark. It's funny how the WNBA does this. You'll never see the WNBA make...
A new debate has emerged around the way women's professional basketball is being covered, with some fans arguing that certain media narratives place unusual emphasis on what happens when a particular superstar is off the court. According to this perspective, the focus can quickly shift toward conclusions that extend beyond what a single game's results alone can demonstrate. That has sparked broader discussions about how individual performances and team success are framed in the public conversation. The larger question becomes even more interesting when you examine the actual box score and overall game statistics. Looking beyond the headlines often reveals a more complete picture of how the game unfolded and which factors truly influence the outcome. Many fans believe that focusing on one storyline, while overlooking other key performance metrics, can create an incomplete understanding of what ultimately leads to winning basketball. The center of this debate is a difference in philosophy. Some argue that a more conservative style should be viewed as the ideal formula for success, while others believe the league's recent surge in popularity has been driven by exciting, fast-paced, and dynamic basketball. That ongoing discussion continues to shape how fans, analysts, and media outlets interpret the evolution of the sport.
You'll never see the WNBA make a headline. The Minnesota Lynx are the best team without Nafisa Collier, or any of the fans talking about it. Another thing we're...
Consider how unusual that comparison appears when you examine it more closely. In many major professional sports, coverage rarely focuses on celebrating a victory primarily because a team's star player was unavailable. Instead, the discussion typically centers on how the rest of the roster adapted, who stepped up to fill the production gap, and what adjustments were made to overcome the absence of a key contributor. Whether in basketball, football, or other major leagues, the spotlight generally remains on the team's response rather than suggesting it functions better without one of its biggest stars. That context makes the current debate surrounding women's professional basketball especially noteworthy. Many fans have pointed out what they see as a different standard in the way similar situations are discussed. The contrast has fueled an ongoing conversation about media narratives, player impact, and the league's rapid growth. With unprecedented attention, larger audiences, increased sponsorships, and growing financial investment entering the sport, discussions surrounding its biggest stars have become more prominent than ever. As a result, every storyline is examined more closely, and differing perspectives continue to shape the conversation across the basketball community.
Or any of the fans talking about it. Another thing we're going to get into is Stephanie White running into the locker room after a win and throwing shade at Caitlin Clark.
We did a lot of great things.
This brings the discussion directly to the post-game locker room, where the conversation appears to shift from subtle media narratives to more direct commentary. Following a victory, the natural expectation is that the focus would remain on the team's overall performance, highlighting the players' execution, defensive adjustments, and the individual efforts that helped secure the win. Those are typically the moments that deserve the spotlight after a hard-fought game. Instead, much of the attention can quickly turn toward broader storylines and comparisons involving players who were not even on the court. For many observers, that shift raises questions about whether the conversation is centered more on ongoing narratives than on the game itself. It reflects a larger debate about how changing styles of play and emerging stars influence the way the sport is discussed. To many fans, these recurring comparisons do not seem accidental. Rather, they appear to be part of a broader effort to frame the league's evolving landscape through familiar perspectives instead of fully embracing the impact that a transformative player can have on the game's popularity, visibility, and overall direction. Whether that interpretation is accurate remains open to debate, but it continues to fuel discussion across the basketball community.
And throwing shade at Caitlin Clark.
We did a lot of great things. I'm sure this has to be a season low, 7 turnovers. Wow.
Let's take a closer look at the praise being emphasized, especially the attention given to the team's season-low total of 7 turnovers. On the surface, protecting the basketball is one of the most important fundamentals in the sport. Coaches at every level consistently stress the value of limiting mistakes, taking care of possessions, and avoiding unnecessary turnovers. However, context matters just as much as the numbers themselves. A single statistic loses much of its significance when it is separated from the way those results were actually produced during the game. Keeping turnover totals low becomes much easier when the offensive system is built around simple, conservative, and low-risk decisions. If players are rarely asked to attack defenders, deliver difficult passes through tight windows, or create high-value scoring opportunities under pressure, the offense will naturally appear cleaner and more controlled. But a cleaner stat sheet does not automatically translate into elite offensive basketball, nor does it guarantee success against the strongest competition. At the highest level of the game, balancing efficiency with creativity and playmaking often determines whether an offense can consistently perform against top-tier opponents.
So last game it was Ty Harris, the greatest player on earth, the best point guard we've ever seen. But she couldn't.
The inconsistency in the commentary becomes even more noticeable when you compare how quickly the narrative changes from one game to the next. Just 2 days earlier, many analysts were praising the backcourt performance as if it were an all-time showcase, elevating individual guards after a single impressive shooting night or a comfortable victory. The discussion suggested that a slower, more traditional half-court offense was finally the formula the franchise had been searching for to reach its full potential. However, that narrative becomes much harder to defend once the team faces a stronger, more physical defensive opponent. The early praise quickly loses momentum when the offensive production no longer matches the expectations that were created. Building up short-term performances as definitive proof of a long-term solution can be difficult when later results tell a different story. Ultimately, long-term evaluations are determined by consistent production rather than a single standout game. If the underlying basketball metrics begin to contradict the storyline being promoted, fans are likely to notice the gap between the narrative and what is actually happening on the court. Over time, sustained performance provides a more reliable measure than any one-game headline.
But she couldn't do that because Ty Harris was 0 for 4, Raven Johnson was 3 for 9, so combined 3 for 13.
When you examine the actual numbers from the game, the reality becomes much harder to ignore. Several key backcourt players struggled offensively, posting shooting percentages that would normally draw significant criticism at the professional level. A combined 3-4-13 performance from the team's primary ball handlers reflects a difficult offensive night, regardless of the final outcome. Even more telling, failing to convert a single three-point attempt highlights larger concerns about floor spacing, perimeter scoring, and the overall rhythm of the offense during critical stretches. Without a consistent outside shooting threat, opposing defenses can stay compact, protect the paint, and avoid extending their coverage beyond the arc. They have little reason to respect deep-range shooting, allowing them to focus on limiting interior opportunities instead of worrying about players stretching the floor. Despite those offensive struggles, much of the public discussion centered almost entirely on the team's ball security and overall stability, while giving far less attention to the shooting difficulties and the broader offensive challenges revealed by the game's statistics. The contrast between the on-court numbers and the post-game narrative has become a major point of debate among basketball fans and analysts alike.
So combined 3 for 13. 0% from the three-point line. So the first thing out of her mouth was, "We did so good at not turning the..."
The post-game reactions perfectly capture this line of thinking. The very first point emphasized after the final buzzer is often the celebration of taking care of the basketball. That specific message serves as a convenient way to shift attention away from poor shooting performances and other offensive struggles. By centering the conversation on limiting turnovers, the focus moves away from the bigger picture and toward a single statistic that supports the desired narrative. The message sent to fans and the media is clear and consistent. It can be interpreted as a subtle comparison with the team's star player, whose fast-paced, high-usage style naturally creates more difficult passing opportunities and, as a result, more turnovers. Yet that same aggressive approach is also capable of generating far more scoring chances and offensive momentum. The repeated emphasis on conservative play after every victory suggests an ongoing preference for familiarity over innovation. Instead of embracing an exciting, high-upside style that can elevate the team's ceiling, the conversation often rewards a safer and more predictable approach. That contrast reflects the broader debate over whether maintaining traditional methods is more important than adapting to the dynamic style that has helped attract new fans and increased attention to the sport.
We did so good at not turning the ball over. That little shade she always has to throw in Caitlin Clark's direction.
This brings us to the central issue that the league and many of its media partners appear unwilling to address directly. The reality is simple. It's much easier to avoid turnovers when a player is rarely asked to make difficult or creative plays. If a guard's main responsibility is to bring the ball across half court, make a safe pass to the wing, and then stand in the corner while the shot clock runs down, their stat line will naturally look clean. They won't be attempting risky passes, attacking defenders off the dribble, or navigating complex pick-and-roll situations that often lead to mistakes. However, that extremely cautious, low-risk style of basketball is the very approach that kept women's professional basketball out of the mainstream spotlight for decades. The record-breaking crowds filling arenas, the sold-out merchandise, and the historic television audiences didn't arrive to watch predictable, conservative basketball. They came to see an exciting, fast-paced offensive style that pushes the limits of the game and captures attention from every type of fan. The continued effort by some media voices and traditional basketball supporters to praise uninspiring, low-risk basketball simply to strengthen an argument against a rising superstar may ultimately do more harm than good. It risks pushing away the very audience that has fueled the sport's recent surge in popularity. That raises an important question. Are the people guiding the league truly focused on its long-term growth and expanding its fan base, or are they more interested in defending past traditions and proving that the previous generation never needed a once-in-a-generation talent to validate the league's success?
The throw in Caitlin Clark's direction after a win. It'd be really easy not to turn the ball over when you're not asked to do anything, but that's not.
At the end of the day, the statistics speak for themselves. And so does what everyone can clearly see on the court. Basketball fans know the game, and they can easily recognize the difference between a team running an efficient, high-level offense and one simply surviving with cautious possessions against a weaker opponent. Presenting a game filled with poor shooting and low turnovers as the ideal formula for long-term success isn't just questionable analysis. It's an argument many viewers are unlikely to find convincing. The league now finds itself at a pivotal moment, with the divide between traditional basketball thinking and the growing influence of modern stars becoming more noticeable as the season continues. Do you believe the media's claim that this team performs better with a conservative, low-risk approach, or do you think it overlooks the impact of one of the league's most influential players? Share your opinion in the comments below. If you enjoy in-depth basketball discussions and analysis, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you never miss our next breakdown of the biggest stories shaping the sports world.